everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That's Ryan Roberts. We are sans Brian Driscoll today because if anybody lives in our neck of the woods, you know that we had a heck of a storm last night, and Brian's electricity fell victim to that. So we are picking up the mantle for Brian Driscoll, and we are happy to do so. Ryan, how you doing today, man? How's we had 90, wind gusts and furniture flying all over the place, last night in the backyard. It was a lot of fun, but how are things in your neck of the woods?
Everything's good here. We had the big storms overnight yesterday, into yesterday. So that was kind of when the big storm hit, but otherwise I'm good, man. It's
nice.
Another beautiful Tuesday afternoon in New Jersey.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'd use the word beautiful here. It is currently 93 degrees with a real feel of about 103. And I was out all morning working. So I'm happy to be in the elements of the air conditioning. There's no question about that. Glad that I don't live in the 1800s and the air conditioning is a normal thing. So I would not have survived. I'm just going to be honest with you. So
I had to take the daughter to daycare this morning, and it was like 75 at like 7:30 in the morning.
Yes.
I'm like, what is this life right now?
Yeah, what is happening? Why do I feel sticky the second I walk out the door? So yes, so that is what's going on over here in Northern Indiana. It is hot, it is sticky, and it's going to be that way for the next couple of days. So happy to be indoors. But that is not the topic of today's show. But I will also say, before we jump into this too far, last night we kicked off a new show, the Irish Breakdown, or Irish IB Nation Sports Talk. I got to make sure I get that. I got to get it rolling off the tongue with Sean Stiers, and I was on there with him as well, and it was an awesome show. So I highly recommend people go back and take a look at that. We'll be on again tonight at 6 o'clock, and every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 6 to 7-ish, because we went to like 7:20 last night. Great interview last night with former Notre Dame baseball coach Paul Mainieri. And Paul is such a great interview. He was the last Notre Dame coach to take Notre Dame to the College World Series. Now he and Link Jarrett can share that claim at Notre Dame as they are headed in that direction as well. So make sure you check out that show last night. Make sure you check out today's version of the show. Really pumped up about that. Mace AK has a comment. Yeah, and Vince was wearing Michigan colors during Sean's show. #puke. And today, inadvertently, I have Tennessee colors on. So, because Gatorade. I mean, it is what it is. So yeah, make sure you check out the show tonight. We're having a blast. It's just completely different than the afternoon shows. So anybody that was there, hope you guys enjoyed it and hope you guys are back tonight. A lot of fun stuff. We got a little Top Gun we're going to talk about tonight. So, and believe it or not, we are going to parlay the Top Gun into Notre Dame football. So
have you seen the movie?
Oh yes.
I didn't see it.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was better than the first one. Personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely take some time to go see that. I know you're knee deep into the childhood thing with the little guys, but I took my son, and of course I made him watch the '86 one as well. So that was fun. But anyway,
we went to go see Jurassic World, not to go off on a tangent. So nice. We saw Jurassic World at least. So we're not completely out of date, but yeah, we haven't seen Top Gun yet.
No, that's next on our list for sure. We want to see Jurassic World as well. And there's like a period of time when, and anybody that has kids will understand this. When you have little kids, there's a period of time where like the adult movies, you have no idea what was playing for a few years because you just don't get out. And that is definitely the case for us when we had little ones. But now I can take my kid. So, it's good. It's all good. But let's jump into today's topic. So all the magazines are out. You got Lindy's, you got Athlon, you got Phil Steele. You've got all these magazines, these preseason magazines where they go through and they rank the different position groups and things of that nature. And we're going to kind of discuss Lindy's and Athlon. We're going to single out those two. We're going to talk defense today. So we're going to talk about where Lindy's and Athlon ranked the defensive position groups. And then there's also some individual position rankings as well. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about where you and I would rank these position groups two different ways. One going into the season, and then one, if they play the way we think they should play, where they will be ranked when the season is over. So a little projection, a little prognostication as well. So we're just going to dive right in, and we're going to go in order. We're going to go front to back. We're going to start with the big guys on the defensive line. Ryan, I will give the stats that Lindy's and Athlon gave the defensive line. I think that you and I could probably agree that the defensive line is the strength of the defense. I don't think that's hugely arguable, and both publications tend to agree with that. Lindy's has the defensive line ranked 4th overall in the country as a defensive line. Athlon has the defensive line ranked 7th overall. So a little bit of a difference there, but this is a little foreshadowing. The only group that is ranked in both Lindy's and Athlon, which I thought was very interesting. So let's talk defensive line. Also, I will say that Lindy's does a position player ranking as well, and they've got Isaiah Foskey as the number 3 defensive end in their rankings. So I'm sure that helps their 4th place overall ranking. Do you feel like the defensive line is a top 10, top 5, top 3? Where do you rank this defensive line going into the weekend? Going into the season, excuse me.
Yeah, this show actually came at a perfect time because, we were talking before the show and I got Lindy's yesterday. So I was kind of combing through everything yesterday and I was looking at it. And for people that don't have that one specifically, they have Clemson, LSU, Baylor, and then Notre Dame coming in at 4th. And Vince, honestly, when you kind of dissect a little bit of the teams in front of them, I would argue that Notre Dame's a top 3 team in that capacity, right? So I actually think they're ranked a little bit low in both of them, to be honest with you. Because, I know we'll talk a little bit more about this, but like Clemson has Brian Bresee, they have Miles Murphy, they have Xavier Thomas, they have KJ Henry, it's a Tyler Davis. It's a fantastic defensive line. I don't think anybody has a real argument against Clemson, but I can make an argument against LSU. I can make an argument against Baylor. So I actually think Notre Dame's defensive line, 7th is crazy to me. Like, that is extremely disrespectful in my opinion. And I think 4th is even a little bit low, to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
So I think they were both kind of lowballed a little bit on the defensive line ranking.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of guys on the defensive line that have not gotten the national love that they should be getting up to this point. I feel like, Jason Ademilola, Justin Ademilola, Riley Mills, for example. I think those 3 guys in particular are getting no love whatsoever nationally, right? I think Jason gets a little bit, but he doesn't get enough. There's no question. His twin brother, Justin, clearly doesn't get enough. And I think Riley Mills is going to explode onto the stage as well. So when you think of Notre Dame's defensive line, and depending on how deep these guys are going into the depth chart and how much they're actually paying attention, where do they, is it just Isaiah Foskey and everybody else? You know what I mean? Is that why they're ranked 7th? Because Isaiah Foskey is clearly a great talent. Don't get me wrong. He's a first-round talent in the NFL draft. So is it him and everybody else? Is it just him in depth? I want to know how these guys are looking at it, because I agree with you. I think 7th is lowballing it for sure. I could be talked into 4th going into the season.
Right.
And I'd be okay with that, pending the argument. But I would also say that coming out of the season, if things go the way we think that they're going to go, I think that they do much better than 4th for sure.
Well, I think when you look at, so from a national perception perspective, right? Like Isaiah Foskey is obviously the lone real commodity, right? Because like you said, I put it on Twitter last week in a clip of Jason Ademilola actually absolutely just obliterating the USC offensive line, which I know wasn't good last year, but for my money, Jason Ademilola is the most underrated defensive lineman in college football.
I agree.
The kid, I thought he was fantastic last year, Vince. Like, he's not, the stats need to come more, like he needs to be a more productive player. He needs to finish a little bit more, but he was just so disruptive last year, man. He made a lot of plays. And even going back to 2 years ago in that playoff game against Alabama, he gave them everything that they could handle. So
completely
I think he's
agree,
incredibly underrated. Yeah. I think that from a national perspective, you just know Isaiah Foskey, and then you look at the box score and say, like, Ademilola is a good player, but like, is he a difference maker? I would say, yes, he's potentially a difference maker on the defensive line. I really do think so. And then I think someone just put, Justin is also underrated. Absolutely.
No
Justin
doubt.
Ademilola. Was he second on the team last year, Vince? Right?
Yeah, second on the team in sacks, and he gets no love whatsoever because I don't know because he wasn't a starter or what the case is, but he gets zero love nationally. He gets a lot of love from IB. We love the kid. There's no question, but zero love nationally, and that's a huge problem for me. I think if he was getting more respect, I think these numbers are higher as a whole, right, than they are at 4th and 7th. I absolutely agree with that.
And I also would say, we as people that cover the team, we kind of have a very high expectation of what Riley Mills is going to do this year, right? Like as a breakout player. And this is kind of pushing a little bit of the heat off of National for a second here with these rankings. Is they don't really know what to expect of Riley Mills, right? Like we covered the team, so obviously they don't have like a deep understanding of we're going to expect this 6'5", 283-pound defensive end to just be a difference maker like we think that he can be. So that's the projection part of it. But I think ultimately what is keeping them a little down on these lists is the fact that, like you said, the Adamalolos are really underrated football players. I think Howard Cross is an underrated football player. So I think Isaiah Foskey gets his fanfare. He gets the national perception.
No doubt.
But I think that the problem is that there's just a lot of guys that kind of go under the radar for Notre Dame.
Yes, I agree completely. So let's go with your preseason ranking for the defensive line, and then hit me with your postseason ranking for the defensive line. I'm going to assume that it's going to go up. It'll probably go up for all three of these, I would imagine, if they play the way they're supposed to. But where do you see the defensive line?
I would rank them 3rd right now. So I'm only going to push them up one spot, just because, like I said before, Clemson's the no-brainer. They're going to be number 1. LSU is the team that I think is a really good conversation piece because they have Jacqueline Roy, who's a really talented defensive tackle, coming back. They have a defensive end named Ali Gay, who's a talented player. Then they have BJ Ojulari, who is Aziz Ojulari's younger brother. So they have a lot of dudes. I think they have more names, right? Like there are more expectations for each of those three than there is from a 1 to 3 capacity for Notre Dame. But I think that they're in the ballpark. I'll give the slight nod to LSU at number 2, just because, again, BJ Ojulari is a known commodity. Jacqueline Roy is a known commodity. Ali Gay is a known commodity. You have Isaiah Foskey, who national perception, when I say known commodity, Isaiah Foskey, but the Adamalolos are just a little underrated. But I'll put them at 3 right now, just because I think that you can make the argument with LSU. So I'm not going to push back a ton there. But I ultimately think that they could be the number 2 team from a defensive line perspective after the season. Because, again, it's going to be hard to beat Clemson because we're talking about, and I'm talking about from an NFL draft perspective for a second here. Brian Bresee is a potential first-round pick. Miles Murphy is a potential first-round pick. Xavier Thomas is probably a draftable player. KJ Henry, Tyler Davis is for sure a draftable player. So, they go 5 deep. And then, they'll even go, they got a couple backup defensive tackles that are pretty good players as well. So I think the depth piece is just too much probably for Notre Dame to overtake it. But I can see Notre Dame finishing number 2 because I really do think that they have all the pieces to be a more impactful unit than LSU next year. And they for sure should be up against Baylor, who was number 3 on the Lindy's ranking here.
Okay. I like that. For me, like I said, I could be convinced about a number 4 ranking going into the season. So I will say, and my rankings are going to be more, in a vacuum, right? Like, you know what? That's a top 5 group. That's a top 3 group. That's a top 10 group, that kind of a thing, in any year. So I'm going to go with the defensive line as a top 5 group. I think that they're more towards the 4-5 range right now. But I think if they have the season that we're talking about, right? If Justin continues to do what he's doing and takes a little bit of a step up, right? If Isaiah takes a little bit of a step up, if Riley Mills takes the leap that we all think that he's going to take, I think Jason's stats, I don't know if he's going to play better, but I just feel like his stats are going to be better. And so if that's the case, then they're going to be a higher ranked group, right? And then look at the depth, right? What else is everybody, what's the depth going to do? Are they going to be able to help that group out a little bit? So I think that they're a top 5 group going in, but I think they could very easily be a top 2 group going out. Okay. Yeah. So, they're only raising 2 or 3 spots, but at the same time, that's a pretty massive leap when you're talking about top 5 to top 2. So I still think the defensive line is the best group on this defense. I think they will ride, as far as this defense goes, is where the defensive line is going to take them, right? And so I think if they do everything we think that they're going to do, I've got them as a top 2 group by the end of the season.
I think you can argue it because I think at least, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Vince, but I know Lindy's thing is they didn't rank Alabama. Like Will Anderson's not included in the defensive line rankings. They have him as a linebacker because they play that 3-4, right? So I think especially, I mean, if you had Alabama that had Will Anderson and Dallas Turner included with the interior players they are, then I think that maybe Notre Dame's, more of a 3-4 team instead of a top 2 potential team. But I agree completely with that out of the equation. I think Clemson's really the only team that you can argue is just like better now from a depth perspective than Notre Dame. They have so many good players on that Clemson defensive line, but I think that really severely underrates the fact that Isaiah Foskey's a dude, Jason Adamalola is a dude, Justin Adamalola is incredibly underrated, Riley Mills could be a dude, Howard Cross is quietly a really good player, Jacob Lacey's a good player when he's able to stay healthy. Like Notre Dame has incredible depth at the defensive line, and I'm excited for that unit. I think that could be the best unit, offensive and defensive, for Notre Dame in 2022. I really would not be surprised if defensive line is a dominant team.
That's a great topic for another show, by the way, ranking the position groups just at Notre Dame alone. Yeah. Right. Take all the groups, offense, defense, and then rank them 1 through, what would it be? 3, 4. I think there's 4 on the offense, 3. So 1 through 7, essentially. I think that would be a lot of fun. So note to self, rank and these position groups. I think that's a show right there. But I think you'd be hard pressed. I think that if you're going to rank the position groups going into the season, to me, it's going to be between the lines. Frankly, it's going to be between the offense and the defensive line, and I think the defensive line has a more proven commodity, going into the season to us, right? Although I'm really excited about where this offensive line is too. So that would be a fun debate, and I think that's something that we're going to do. We're going to have that debate moving forward. But
I wanted to pull this up real quick.
Yes,
Salt
awesome.
Virginia Peanuts says, I will look forward to Notre Dame's defensive line playing way over Clemson's when they meet, and we can compare them in the same game. I agree completely.
That's a good call.
There's no better barometer than seeing them in the same game, in the same setting. And Notre Dame's going to have an opportunity to prove that if they are the best defensive line in the country, they have literally a matchup against Clemson to look forward to.
And I tell you what, if we're talking about that particular matchup, seeing Notre Dame's defensive line go up against Clemson's offensive line, and then Clemson's defensive line going up against Notre Dame's offensive line, I like the Irish, baby. I think they're going to have more of an opportunity to show what they've got against the Clemson offensive line than the vice versa. So, again, when we start breaking down the Clemson tape and we start breaking down that game in October, that's going to be a fun matchup to watch when both defensive lines are on the field. There is no doubt about that. And that's probably where that game is going to be won or lost as well, is which line is going to dominate, which side. So stay tuned to that one because I'm excited. Let's move one step back. So we're going front to back, just because that's what we do as coaches. So front to back, let's talk about the linebacker group. This is where it gets interesting for me, Ryan, is both publications for the linebackers and the secondary. We're obviously talking about linebackers. One has one ranked, the other one doesn't. And then the other position group, one has one ranked and one doesn't. So this is the first one. Athlon actually has the Notre Dame linebacking core ranked 10th overall. Lindy's doesn't have the linebacking core ranked at all. Yeah, which I think is very, very interesting. So I'm assuming, because I have not actually seen the magazine, you have Lindy's in front of you. Do they just rank the top 10?
Yes. Yep. They rank the top 10. And this is why it makes it a little weird, Vince, like for this comparison, because again, they include the pass rushers of like Alabama, for instance, into this equation. So they count the 3-4 outside linebackers, and it's different because you're comparing a Notre Dame team that runs a 2 linebacker set with a rover to a team that has 2 pass rushers and 2 inside. So it's imperfect comparison.
No doubt.
So I think that just throwing that context out there for people to understand is, I don't think it's a perfect comparison, at least from a Lindy's perspective, because you're comparing 2 completely different systems.
Right, exactly. And it's not like the old days where it was very clear cut. Most people ran a 4-3 or they ran a 5-2 or whatever. That's just not the case anymore. You've got hybrid guys, you've got, Isaiah Foskey is going to be dropping into coverage, right? Patello, for example, is he going to be considered by the end of the season? Is he going to be a defensive lineman? Is he going to be a defensive end? Is he going to be a rover? Like, I don't know where he's going to fit best into this defense, to be perfectly honest with you, but he's a guy you got to get on the field someplace, right? So does he strengthen the defensive line? Does he strengthen the linebackers? I don't know the answer to that, right? So those are all, again, it's an imperfect measurement, and I agree with that. And I think the way that they're doing it hurts Notre Dame's linebackers, to be honest with you, because their strength is on the defensive line and at the end position, but those guys aren't considered linebackers. So I think it hurts the linebackers. What they're not taking into account, in my opinion, is what Maris Luafau is going to bring to this linebacking core. I don't think anybody nationally has any idea what number 8 is going to do for this group, right? So if we're looking at this linebacking core, you've got Lindy's unranked. So, I mean, that means they could be 11. I mean, they're only ranking the top 10. I would venture to say that that's probably not the case. But you've got Athlon at 10. You've got Lindy's unranked. I think that's it's tough for me because this kind of also goes into the whole Riley Mills conversation, right, with the defensive line and projecting as to what they could be. But Maris Luafau was going to be a starter last year, and he got hurt in preseason camp. So he's a returning starter. He's coming off the injury. We all liked what we saw, going in, during the spring. How's that going to translate to the fall? How's that going to translate to the season? So number one, do you think those rankings are fair? And number two, where are you ranking the linebacking core going into the season?
I actually do kind of think it's fair a little bit. I mean, so again, Athlon has them ranked 10th, and then they're unranked by Lindy's. I just think there's a lot of projection to it, right? Like kind of like you just said there. I think Maris Luafau is going to be a phenomenal football player. I really do.
So
but the fact of the matter is he's coming off an injury, and we haven't seen him in 2 years. And when we did, he was just kind of a fiery redshirt freshman who was just running hit type of player. We need to see him take a step forward, obviously, as a player. I think he is. Sure. I mean, everybody that listens to the show, I think, knows that there's probably no bigger Maris Luafau truther on this show than myself. Like, I love Maris upside, man. I think he's a player that will linebacker, but also he could play some Mike with how the game has kind of evolved at this point. Like, I think he's a difference maker, a playmaker on the second level. If he had 100 plus tackles and 10 plus tackles for loss next year, I'd be like, yep, makes about sense to me, right?
Wouldn't surprise me at all, especially considering that position led the team in tackles last year with JD, right? So that wouldn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form if he was the statistical leader of that core. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And then even with the Mike position, you have a little bit of projection again, because it's like, okay, JD's moving over to Mike, right? Like, how is he going to look there? It's a different position than he played last year. How's Bo Bauer going to fit into this conversation? Right. Is Junior Tuialamaka going to take a large percentage of snaps at some point during the season? So I think there's just a lot of unknown commodities to a degree. And even the known commodity that you have in JD Bertrand, who had over 100 tackles last year, is also playing a new position, right? And I think as long as Rover is included in this, and I'm assuming that it is,
I would say so. Yeah.
Jack Kaiser, I mean, he had good moments, but he needs to play better. Like, there's no doubt about it. You need to get more production from the Rover position. I don't think that's a hot take at all. So I think that it's fair for them not to be in the top 10. I'm happy that they did make the top 10 for one of them. But when you compare them to, especially with Lindy's, again, that is including outside linebackers, like Alabama has Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Henry To'oTo'o coming back, right? Like, there's some really good linebacker units, honestly, because I'm looking even like Iowa, Jack Campbell, Justin Jacobs coming back. NC State's returning Peyton Wilson, Drake Thomas. Oregon has Penei Sewell's younger brother, Noah Sewell, and Justin Flo coming back from injury. There's a lot of good linebacker units. So I don't think it's hot takey, or I think it's understandable that Notre Dame didn't make the top 10. I think they have the upside to being a top 10 unit, especially if Maris Luafau comes back and he's the player that we're looking at here. I think they are for sure a top 10 team. And if JD plays good football at the Mike, and it's mixed in with the youth of a Junior Tuialamaka and Bo Bauer kind of mixing in that position, and even a Prince Collie kind of mixing and matching. And I think that there's a lot of depth to that linebacker position, not even counting the freshmen that are coming in. Like, is Jalen Sneed going to play a little bit? Is Junior going to play at all? Nolan Ziegler? Like, there's a lot of talent in that linebacker room. So I think they could finish top 10, but I'm actually okay with them not being in the top 10 to start the season.
I was actually surprised when I was told that they were ranked, that they were top 10. That actually surprised me, because I would not have had them there. I could be talked into certain things, but at the same time, to me, they felt to me like a top 15 group, like a 14, 15. Like that is kind of where I feel like the linebackers belong going into the season. Now, again, you have to take past production and then projected production for sure. I mean, I think Maris is going to be a huge asset to this group. I do. And I think that, again, are we Patello? Is he a linebacker? I will say he's a linebacker because right now he's practicing at Rover, right? So I think he's going to be an asset to this group. I think Junior Tualamaka is going to be an asset to this group. I think in spaces, Bo Bauer is going to be an asset to this group, right? And the questions about JD moving to Mike, I think, are legitimate, right? He has all this production at will, but how does that translate to being a Mike? It's different. You're playing inside of a box. It's just a little bit different, right? So I think there's enough questions right now that I have them as a top 15 group. Now, if those questions get answered the way I think and hope that they will get answered, I think that they could project to be a top 7 or 8 group. And I think D-Rock hit the nail on the head for me. It's like he's inside my head. Linebackers ranked 10 to 15. Hope by the end of the season they're top 7. That's exactly where I'm at. That's exactly how I feel that the linebackers are. I think that if there's a quote-unquote weakness for this group going into the season, it's the linebackers. But I think they could easily be a strength, not the strength, but a strength of this defense moving forward. I like how they're being coached. I like how they're being recruited. I think they're going to be deep. And I don't think this linebacking core has been deep in the past. When they sustained an injury, they were in trouble, right? I think the depth of the linebacking core is really important. I think we're going to see a lot of that depth, not because somebody gets hurt, but because they're just going to be rotating guys in and out, and that's going to help them because guys are going to be fresher at the end of the game too. Right. The sideline to sideline speed from this linebacking core is really, really good. This is an athletic linebacking core, and I think people are going to be excited to see them moving sideline to sideline, making plays in the backfield. I think this defense opens up a little bit more, even more so than it was last year, and I think the linebackers are going to start making plays behind the line of scrimmage. They had opportunities last year. They didn't come through kind of in big moments, right? When I think that they should have. I think they turn a corner with this group because most of those guys are back. They've got great depth coming up from the younger classes and the recruiting. I like where this linebacking core is going. I can't say they're a top 5 group, at the end of the season. I'm not ready to go there yet. I will say top 8. At the end, I say I'm fine with them being a top 10 to 15 group going into the season. I think they've got a lot to prove. I think they will, but I still think they have a lot to prove.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these lists are always built off known commodities, right? Like, again,
they have to be, I think.
From a national perspective, 100%.
Right.
It's not like these guys are, Notre Dame beat writers, right? That are watching the game and evaluating the film and doing all that type of stuff. They're literally looking, okay, who do they have coming back? They have J.D. Bertrand, who had 100-plus tackles. Besides that, you have Jack Kaiser and Bo Bauer. Like, most of the people probably don't even talk much about Maris Loifau because they don't know what to expect from him from a national perspective. So, again, it's a little bit of an understanding of how these things are ranked. But I think the upside of this team is fantastic from the linebacker perspective. And I think Jay Henry said it perfect here in the chat. He said linebacker speed is going to surprise a lot of people. And I agree completely. I mean, it's not even just Maris. Like, there is speed everywhere on that second level. So I'm excited about it. I mean, you talked a lot about Jordan Patello. I mean, he could be an absolute weapon mixing in at Rover, maybe even, somewhere Will. Like,
push him inside at times in certain packages. You could put him at defensive end at certain packages. And really, it's all about him making sure he's right off the field to be right on the field. But if we're just talking from a football perspective, he could be special, man. He's kind of a jack of all trades. I don't know if he's a master of none, but he's a jack of all trades, and you can use his versatility to your advantage. There's no doubt about that.
Agree.
So that's the linebacking core. Let's talk secondary. And I think secondary is where I have a feeling in the chat that secondary is where we're going to have the most differing of opinions, right? Because there's a lot of, exactly. I think a lot of people underestimate this secondary because they don't hear certain names, on the TV broadcast and things like that. And look, I get it. You don't hear from a guy, you don't think that they're playing well. Well, that's a good thing. And we've talked about that in the past. And I don't want to talk down to our viewers because they're a bright group. And they know that Cam is the man. So they know going in that I'm going to be, president of the Cam Hart fan club for good reason. Lindy's has Cam Hart ranked as the number 10 corner in all of college football. And if you're if you're a top 10 corner, you're getting drafted pretty high up, right? You're an early day 2, maybe late day 1 guy if you're a top 10 corner, right? And I think he's only going to get better moving forward in this season, because I think that depending on how you use Joseph at safety is going to depend on how Cam Hart is used at corner as well. So I think teams are going to maybe try to test number 5 a little bit here and there. And I think he's going to prove where he belongs and where he's ranked. As a group, here's the biggest disparity as well. Lindy's has the secondary ranked 4th overall. Athlon doesn't have them ranked at all.
That's crazy.
So that is a huge difference, huge difference in secondary ranking. What say you, or let's get your first thoughts on the secondary, and let's talk about these rankings that Lindy's and Athlon have.
Yeah, that's like I mean, if you go on to recruiting rankings and see the differences between the ESPNs and the Rivals and the 247s, that reminds me of it, man. It's that's such a big discrepancy. It really is. I wanted to add in real quick before we get too far into it. Someone to put in the chat, Brandon Plesner said that for the linebackers and the fact that they're being coached by Al Golden and James Laurinaitis is huge. We didn't even talk about that, Vince, so I just wanted to throw that in there. I mean, that's
a good point. That's a good point.
From a development perspective, I agree completely there, Brandon. So thank you for the point there. Secondary, I mean, so I know we're talking about the college version of players, and NFL isn't that doesn't 100% matter from a production perspective. But I did just want to add in, if you are on the premium message board, I dropped some early spring grades coming directly from the NFL, and they had Cam Hart pegged as a 2nd and 3rd rounder going into the season. And that's after 1 year of starting experience at cornerback. So obviously Cam Hart's starting to become a much more known commodity from that sense. And Brandon Joseph is absolutely a known commodity. I mean, he was an All-American 2 years ago, led the nation with 6 interceptions. I think he only played 6 games for Northwestern that year because they had that abbreviated season. And then last year he has 80 tackles, 3 more interceptions. So kids literally had 9 interceptions over the last 2 years. And then you kind of add that in with the upside of a Cam Hart. I mean, I think the upside for those 2 players just as a tandem is incredible, right? And then you have a bunch of younger safeties kind of mixed in with some vets, right? You don't really know 100% what to expect from a Ramon Henderson. Xavier Watts is kind of a wild card. So I get why, I do understand why Athlon had them not ranked for 2nd, because you're 2 of the 4 is really good. But then after that, it's okay, how good is Ramon Henderson going to be? What is DJ Brown going to do if he gives you some valuable reps? Is Houston Griffith going to play? What's the corner opposite Cam Hart going to look like? That's my biggest question. I think that Ryan Barnes has the opportunity to be a really good player if he is able to take that next step. And I think Clarence Lewis can be a contributor in multiple ways in the secondary. But I think the big question here is 2 out of 4 are really good, but what do the other 2 look like? So I would actually probably cut the difference here, Vince, I think, right? We had one that was unranked and one that was 4. I'd say it's a little lower to begin the year. I would say probably 7 to 8. I would be okay, I get there, and that's a solid baseline. But then I think that Lindy's does have it right long term. I think Lindy's ranking them number 4. If they put it all together, if both those guys take steps, Brandon Joseph and Cam Hart, which you would expect, and you just get good at the other positions, you don't even need great. I think that's an incredible upside for that barometer. So just wanted to answer this one real quick from Jay Henry, who said, who's the best secondary in Lindy's? Jay, they have Alabama ranked as number 1 with Jordan Battle, DeMarco Helms, and that crew, Brian Branch, and all those guys coming back. So just to answer your question there. So I think Vince 7-8 right now, but then I think they could be a top 4 unit if they put it all together.
Yeah, I mean, that 4 is about as high as I would go. I was actually, and again, everybody knows, and it's kind of a joke, but at the same time, I love Cam Hart. I think he's a really good player. Brandon Joseph clearly, helps bring that secondary up. no question about it. And Cam Hart coming back as a second-year starter, being the number one corner 2 years in a row. The kid's playing with an amazing amount of confidence. And then having a guy like Brandon Joseph behind you, you don't have to worry about what's going on at safety. And I think that part is huge as well. It's just the question marks at the other positions are too big for me to ignore. And that's the problem with this preseason ranking for me. I'm not going to sniff 4. I don't, they've got Brandon Joseph ranked as the number 2 safety in the country at Lindy's. And then Cam Hart is the number 10 corner. Well, if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, how can you not have them ranked high? I get that. But at the same time, there's just too many questions in the secondary for me to say as a group they're going to be that high. I love the upside of Brandon Joseph. I love the upside of Cam Hart. I think, Ryan Barnes, I think, has a tremendous upside, but he is a 100% unproven. I've seen him in practice. I love what he looks like at practice, but he's 100% unproven on Saturdays, right? Clarence Lewis has had a ton of opportunities, but he's going to have to take a step up if he's going to be the corner every day opposite Cam Hart, right? Then you got young guys like Jaden Mickey. You've got, at safety, Xavier Watts, right? He's kind of a lost figure in this whole thing, right? We all wanted him to move over to wide receiver. Well, he's sticking at safety. So is he going to start? Is it going to be Ramon Henderson? Is he going to be in that rotation? What happens to DJ Brown? Like there's so many question marks outside of Brandon Joseph and Cam Hart that I can't come anywhere near 4th. I would honestly, even with how good those two are, and then maybe this is the pessimistic, BK PTSD or however you want to phrase it, right? I would have them unranked going into the season. I'm really nervous about certain aspects of this secondary and what they're going to look like, and they are going to get absolutely tested in the first game of the season when they go to the Horseshoe against Ohio State, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to find out real quick how good this secondary really is. And is it unfair to be grading the secondary after one game? A little bit. I mean, it's a little unfair, but I think they have the opportunity to get a lot better. Right. All those guys that I just named that are question marks, if they all come through, I mean, the secondary is going to be really good, right? Mm-hmm. I would say for me, the ceiling for the secondary coming out is top 5. I would say the going into the season for me, I've got them unranked. They're also kind of a top 15 for me. Even with how high those other two guys are ranked, the question marks abound at those other two spots. So I'm going top 15, and I would say the ceiling is top 5, probably that 5-6 range for me coming out of the season.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how these teams go, how every one of them kind of projects moving forward, because I'm just looking at the 3 that are ahead on Lindy's. So you have Alabama, like I said, they have Jordan Battle, they have DeMarco Helms, they have Brian Branch, who are all really good safeties. They also have Eli Ricks that's transferring over, from LSU. So that's a lot of names. I would even argue that Texas A&M deserves to be number 1 over Alabama, because they have Antonio Johnson, who's a fantastic safety, Tyreek Chappelle, Jalen Jones at corner. They have the other safety, Damani Richardson. Like, they have some dudes there. Can't argue either one of those, obviously, for Notre Dame. And then Georgia is the one that starts to get a little more comparable, because they have Keely Ringo coming back, and Chris Smith's a solid player, but I mean, they're losing guys like Darian Kendrick off the team last year, and the safety Lewis Seen that went in the first round. So Georgia's where I think the talking point comes as far as like the upside. I mean, Vince, this list goes off it falls off a cliff after Notre Dame at 4 for Lindy's, at least. They have Ohio State number 5.
Oh, see, now I'm trying to disrespect the whole list completely. I mean, Ohio State secondary is garbage, or at least it was last year. Now, maybe a year under their belt is going to do some good for them, but holy moly, that makes me wonder about Notre Dame's ranking at 4.
You want to talk about projection? Like, I like the Ronnie Hickman kid from Ohio State, the safety, but Brown, the other corner, they haven't been guys yet. I mean, it's a big projection. So I understand why Notre Dame's in that conversation for one of them, but I think in a vacuum, it's more of like in a typical year, where's Notre Dame ranking? I would say, again, 7 to 8 right now, I think is fair. And then I think that they could be a top 4 team if they put it all together. But again, that is projection kind of into the conversation as well.
That is amazing. I'm still wrapping my mind around Ohio State being 5. Like, do I think Notre Dame secondary is better than Ohio State secondary? Yup. So I guess if they're going to put Ohio State at 5, then I guess I don't have a problem with Notre Dame being at 4, but my bigger problem is with Ohio State at 5. So
yeah, again, it kind of falls off the table. You have Ohio State at 5, Utah at 6, who has one really good corner, but not much else after Clark Phillips, Michigan, Penn State, Miami, and Michigan State at 10. So not a ton of great secondaries, at least looking forward right now.
So, it's kind of like that. My son just ran at the Indiana State track meet, right? And for example, like the 800 was like the best 800 they've had in years at the state meet, and like 6th place would have won state like any other year. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel like the secondary ranking is. Like the bar is like, boom. So, is Notre Dame a top 4 secondary this year? Because based on everybody else, well, maybe. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Maybe. Yeah. It's interesting the way all these rankings come about. You know what I mean? It's very, very interesting. So there you have it with the 3 position groups. I'm going to throw you a curveball, Ryan. And I don't even know if they ranked them like this in those magazines. I assume they did. How about let's do defense as a whole?
Okay.
Let's do defense as a whole. Did they do defensive rankings as a whole in those books, or is it just
not in this one? No, okay. They just did unit ranks.
All right. I want to do the defense as a whole. And again, I know I'm throwing you a curveball here. Where do you see, we just talked about all 3 position groups. Where do you see this Notre Dame defense going into the season, and where do you see them coming out of the season?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were number 15 in total defense, or top 15 in total defense last year, right?
So, yes.
So with everything they have coming back, I think they have to be a top 10 defense to start the season. The question comes next is, how high can they go? Like, I mean, I think it's very realistic to say with Isaiah Foskey, Cam Hart, Brandon Joseph, Maris Loythal coming back from injury, Jason and Justin Adamalola, it can be a top 5 defense. I mean, wouldn't you say? Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they're a top 5 defense when it's all said and done.
I'm trying very hard to not sound fanboyish. I've got my analyst hat on. It's this one right here. This is the analyst hat. I feel like going into the season, if we're just talking proven commodities, right? You've got an All-American at safety. You've got a top 10 corner. You've got some pretty darn good linebackers coming back. You've got a potential All-American with Isaiah Foskey. You've got a potential All-American, in my opinion, with Jason Adamalola. So, I mean, you've got multiple potential All-Americans on this team, right? This is a top 10 defense going in. And I don't even think that is projecting and being fanboyish in any way. I think this is a top 10 defense. And I think they've been a top 15 to top 10 defense for the past few years. I mean, the defense has been their calling card, right? I think if a lot of the questions get answered in a manner in which we think that they're going to get answered, right? If Marist has the upside and he proves it on the field, if Patello does what he needs to do, if Justin takes a step forward, if Cam Hart really becomes that lockdown corner, if they can find a serviceable corner on the other side who just isn't going to get burnt all the time, right? If they find a really good complement at safety, all of those things come into play. And I don't think that that's stretching the truth a whole lot that those things would happen. I think they're a top 5 defense. I do. And they're going to need to be a top 5 defense if this team has CFP aspirations and winning a game in the college football playoff, right? That's the next step. If they're going to win a game in the college football playoff, if they're going to dominate a New Year's Six game, all of these different things, all these things that you want to check off, I think they have to be. I think they have to be a top 5 defense, and I think they can be.
Oh, muted myself. I agree completely. And Mace AK has something interesting. I know this would be a Brian question if you wanted to pop it on. It's possible the D will have, it's possible the D will have lower ranking than last season, but end up being better overall. Mace, I don't disagree. I think it changes year to year, right? That's why we're kind of just trying to evaluate in a vacuum a little bit, like what a typical year would look like. Cause you're absolutely right. It could be, there could be several teams that take massive steps forward and maybe it's not as offensive of a dictated season as it was last year. Like it is a very independent season to season. So I agree with you. It's possible that the defense is better as a whole, but is a lower ranked team just based upon what's happening around the country. I think that you have a valid point there.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see this defense develop. And I also think, and I don't want to project to another show, But I think the offense is going to take a step in the right direction. And if they do what we think they're going to do, the defense is going to be more rested. They're going to have more of an opportunity to fly around the football. It's not going to be, well, hopefully the defense can hold them here, because we're done scoring points. So hopefully the defense can hold them. I think it's going to be the offense takes a step, but then allows the defense to be that much better. And I understand where Mace is coming from. I really do. I think that that's a possibility that that's the case, because maybe they're not going to be on the field as long. And so they're not going to have an opportunity to be as good as they were, right? I think that's all very possible. And I also think the schedule that Notre Dame has this season has better offenses. And so they may just have better offensive numbers just because the offenses are better than what Notre Dame has faced in the past, right? And when you talk top 10 defenses, it's not just the eyeball test. It's how many yards are you giving up per game? And that could go up, but points per game could go down. It just all depends, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why I wanted to throw up Mace's last comment where he said lots of other teams won't play as many good offenses as Notre Dame.
Right.
And
there you go.
It's a great point. It's one of those things where there's context to rankings sometimes, right?
Right.
So yeah, Mace, it's a great point. I think that it really is dependent upon the schedule you play. And there's a lot of different context to kind of rank teams. Cause does it really matter if a team ranks as a top 5 team, but they played a bunch of cupcakes all year, and Notre Dame ranks number 8, but they played the schedule they played? I think that's where the context comes into the conversation.
Absolutely. So I think we can both agree top 10 going in. If they're going to be who we think they can be a top 5 team. And if they're not a top 5 team, I don't think that Notre Dame achieves what we think that they should achieve as a team, to be honest with you. So,
yep.
It's going to take both sides of the ball. That's absolutely facts. So we're going to do a little daily mailbag here. Ryan, you good for a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So we got some things started already. I know we've got some super chats, so let's pull up some of these as well. Let's start with Christopher Morgan's super chat. Thank you very much, Christopher. Really appreciate that. Hey guys, just wanted to say hello. How are you feeling about this 98-degree heat with real feel being 111 degrees? I'm a hermit today with my AC set on 65, watching you guys having a beer. LOL, stay cool. I have to say that if I wasn't working, that sounds pretty darn good to me. It's hot. It's hot. It's sticky. There's no point in being outside if you don't have to. Everything's getting canceled left and right around here. So stay inside, stay cool. No doubt about that.
Yep, agree completely. It's only high 80s today in New Jersey, so not quite as bad, but
we'll send the heat your way. The heat's coming, buddy.
Make sure you get inside, you relax, stay hydrated. It is, even here where it's not quite as hot as where it is it is not pleasant outside at all.
That is accurate. I'm not a fan of the heat in any way, shape, or form. Another super chat here from Mark Stewart. Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate it. If the secondary plays to that number 4 prediction, Notre Dame is going to be nasty.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree. To Mace's point earlier, right? If you have the number 4 ranked, let's just say pass defense in college football, and you played Ohio State and USC and those types of passing teams, then man, you are going to be a dangerous and difficult team to beat each and every week.
No doubt. And if you've got a number 4 secondary that can hold their own back there, you're going to get a lot of help from the defensive line, right? Those guys are going to be terrorizing quarterbacks all season long. And they're going to make the secondary's job easier at times and more difficult at times, right? Facts. So if the secondary can hold their own behind that defensive line, that's a recipe for a lot of success for Notre Dame. There's no question about that. Okay, let's get into some of these starred questions. Of course, there's a recruiting question because Ryan's on the show, and there should be. Salty Virginia Peanuts wants to know any word on Richard Young's visit. I believe he came in yesterday. Is that accurate?
He actually ended up coming in today.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to get, so originally he was scheduled from the 13th to the 15th. We're still trying to figure out confirmation if that means that he's going to stay an extra day since he only got here on the 14th or not. But Salty, I would say check back in with us after the 15th or the day of the 15th, because this is one where Richard doesn't really talk to the media much. So this is one where we probably won't get too much intel until the visit is completed on how exactly it went. But word is that he got in today, and we'll have we'll be sure to keep you guys updated, everybody out there, on how that visit went when it has concluded. Fincher,
you see, it's contagious. All right. So another recruiting question here from Jay. He says, Vincent Ryan seeing a lot of predictions for Rico Flores to Notre Dame. Could his signing negatively impact Christian Hamilton's recruitment?
No, not necessarily, because I think that the key to Notre Dame is that they want to take 4 to 5 wide receivers in this class. So Rico, they project more as an outside in type of guy. Like, he could definitely play in the slot at times, but he is absolutely going to play on the outside too at Notre Dame. He's more of like that field wide receiver than he is a true slot. Christian Hamilton's a true slot player. So they've been selling to Christian already, and he's scheduled to be on campus here soon, about the potential of him playing with other guys, right? And his position's kind of very specific to the offense. So now, Jay, I don't think that it compromises Christian at all for the fact that Flores may end up with Notre Dame. I think that both those players can play at the same time. I don't think it blockades anybody.
Okay. 99 problems, but BK ain't one. Great name. Still love it. It seems we talk about Patello's potential a lot. What would be a good camp for him if everything clicked? I mean, how good do you think he could be? And then he follows it up with, or she, I apologize. I ask because I'm really high on Patello's ability, and the thought of pairing Patello up as a chaos disruptive player with Foskey and Mills manning the ends seems insanely appealing.
I would say this. I compared him the other day. I think you were on that show too, Vince. We were talking about it. I think that he could be a Zach Bond type of player that used to play at Wisconsin a couple years ago. So Wisconsin plays a 3-4 base, and they had Zach Bond, who was kind of like a 3-4 outside linebacker, but then they also drop him back to the second level, and he would kind of do some things in space and rush the passer and do kind of a variety of things. And I think that's Patello. I mean, I even commented like maybe Patello's never a double-digit sack player, but then Brian was basically like, if he's got his head on straight and he could be that pass rusher, then he could be a double-digit sack guy. He could be a starting Sam. He could be a Will. Like, I think the upside's there. So I would say versatility is a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
When talking Jordan Patello, I think he can affect the games in a lot of different ways. So I think he could be a half Viper, half Sam Backer, half, I know that's more than two halves, but he can play the rover spot. Like, he's got that versatility to him. So I would say something like a Zach Bond as far as like how he can affect the game that used to play at Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, because I think his quickest path to getting on the field is being comfortable at multiple positions. And that takes time. Like, that takes mental preparation, that takes physical preparation, both on and off the field. And that's where my question marks for Jordan Patello come in, is the off the field stuff. So can he flush that? Because if he can, success looks like success at multiple positions. Because I think his success for the Notre Dame team is at multiple positions, being able to spell different guys and not having a drop off, right? I think he is insanely talented. My only concern is pairing him and Marist, for example, having two potential, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like out of control chaos creators at the same time. That you kind of need that Iceman, that like guy that you always know is going to be in the right place at the right time to back up some of those chaos creators, right? And having two of those guys on the field at the same time can be good at times, but it can also be a liability, and you can get burned. And so success for Jordan Patello is going to be, can the coaches trust you to be in the right place at the right time and yet still be able to create the chaos at multiple positions? That's asking a lot for a guy that didn't play last year, right? So I hope that wasn't too like long-winded of an answer, but I think success for Jordan Patello is multifaceted, and I think he can do it, but we need to see it.
Agree.
Got another super chat here from Christopher Morgan. Thank you so much, Christopher. If you're Al Golden, how do you game plan and prep your defense for September 3rd? Play it by ear or just play with your hair on fire, showing Ohio State this is the new Notre Dame defense?
Well, I mean, you have to play with great energy, right? Like, I mean, I think that's a given from that instance, Christopher. I think from a structural perspective, and again, I know we're going to dive a lot more in depth on how to attack the Ohio State offense, but I really think mixing and matching coverage is going to be huge for them. I don't think that you definitely can't stay in man the whole game against guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba. So you need to mix in some zone. I think that the biggest indicator of success for me is how easily you can get home against CJ Stroud with rushing 4, right? Like if you can win with 4 against 5 and you have an advantage from a numbers perspective in the secondary, I think that's going to be a big indicator of success. So I'd say getting home, getting pressure on CJ Stroud, and playing fast, man. Like there's going to be mistakes at times. Football is not a perfect game at all, but I like fast, aggressive mistakes.
Absolutely. No question. They're not going to play it by ear. They've got too much time to prepare, and this is too big of a game to play it by ear, and they wouldn't play any game by ear. This isn't previous staffs. They're going to have a game plan, and it's going to be a good one, I would imagine. I think controlled chaos is a good way to do it. I think you have to throw as many looks at this Ohio State offense as you possibly can because they just want to run by you. They want to hand the ball off to their amazing running back. There's no question about that. So you're going to have a plan to contain him, and you're going to have a plan to contain the speed on the outside. And I think that all starts with getting in the face of CJ Stroud, right? I mean, that's where it starts and finishes for me. You've got to disrupt the timing of this offense. So I think if you can throw multiple looks at them, both from a coverage standpoint, from a blitz standpoint, from, a front standpoint, all of those different things, be as multiple as you possibly can, be as chaotic as you possibly can, but under control, and, make CJ win the game for you. Can he do that? Of course he can. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate, right? But I think you have to put the whole game on his shoulders. He's going to have to win the game for them.
I think for when CJ's at his best, he's methodical, right? Like he's a pocket passer. He wants to stay in there. He wants to go through his reads and get the football out of his hands.
Right.
If you make him uncomfortable, that is the biggest key for me. You can't just be drop back, go through your reads, throw the football. You have to press and you have to escalate his process, right? Yes. Like you need to quicken him up
speed
a little bit.
Yep.
Exactly. You need to speed him up and you need to confuse him. Like that's where I think mixing and matching coverages and getting pressure with 4 guys. I think that's the biggest thing for me against CJ Stroud.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And this is kind of a similar question. Big Dustin wants to know how you guys feel about Al Golden at DC. I think he was a great pick. I think that he's got a ton of experience. I think he's got a ton of experience on the defensive side of the ball. He's got head coach experience that Marcus Freeman can lean on. I think he was a good pickup for multiple reasons. Let's see what the product looks like on September 3rd and moving forward. Of course, we haven't seen that yet. But I think he was a great choice for what Marcus Freeman was looking for in a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think that it was a really interesting hire because I remember when we were talking about it, and Brian brought it up, right? The last time he called the defense was what, like 2002 or some crazy number like that. So it was definitely an interesting hire. Everything that I've heard of Al Golden, and I mean, I even go back to his Temple days when he was the head coach here, right outside of where I live. And I mean, he's just considered a very bright, smart dude as far as a football guy, right? So I think in the vein of what Marcus Freeman wants to do defensively, with parlaying that with the wisdom that Coach Golden has from his experience, I think it's going to be big time. And he's got a really good defensive staff around him, right? Like you got Freeman from the support side of everything. You have Al Washington. You have James Laurinaitis, who's a grad assistant for your team somehow. You got Mike Mickens, Chris O'Leary. I have high expectations for what the defense can do under Golden.
Chief Brody's got a super chat here. Thank you, Chief. He's going to talk. He's commenting on our weather conversation here with how hot it is. He goes, "What good is it to be from Michigan if the lakes don't even warm up until October? Bring on the 100-degree days, or I'm moving to Texas, man." He's not wrong, because right now, if you went up to Lake Michigan and you tried to jump in, it would be like jumping into an ice bath.
Yeah.
It's so cold. It is so cold. We had an option actually we're renting a lake house up there this year, and we were going to go like right now, like early to mid-June, or we were going to go towards the end of July. And we picked July because of that exact point right there. Hopefully that the lake is a little bit warmer than it is in mid-July, because it is so cold this time of year. It's brutal.
One of the reasons that we don't like Michigan. Another reason to add on.
Just another reason. I know. I spend a whole week up there every year, and I just try to keep my blinders on, man. Just stay forward. Stay focused. Coleman Smith wants to know, where do y'all expect Prince Collie to play, Will or Mike? This is an easy one. I'll throw it up to you.
Yeah, no, he's going to play Will. Right now at Mike, you have J.D. Bertrand making the switch over there. You got Bo Bauer, and you got Junior Tuialamaka. Then you at the Will spot, you have Maris Loifal, and then you have Prince Collie kind of mixing in there. And I'm very excited about Prince. He's a really explosive, physically well put together player. So I'm excited to see him to get some playing time as well.
Look, and I think they're going to treat the linebackers. I have no inside information on this whatsoever, but because of the depth at linebacker, I think they're going to treat it a lot like the defensive line. I think you're going to see some rotation there. I think you're going to see a lot of guys getting a lot of time. I think Prince is going to get time, at will when Marist is out. I mean, look, Marist can't be the home wrecker that everybody wants him to be every down of every game. That's just not possible, right? He's going to need a breather, and I think Prince Collie is not that much of a step down. I think he's going to be a fantastic linebacker, but a different linebacker than Maris. And so he's going to bring a different attributes to that Will spot. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. Just like I think if Patello stays at Rover, he's going to get a lot of playing time behind Jack. I think Jack is going to be your starter, but I think Patello, like I said, is going to hop around in different spots. And I think that Bo is going to get a lot of time, behind JD at Mike. And I think Junior is going to get some time as well as the season wears on. So I think that they're going to use a bit of a rotation at linebacker. And again, I feel like that only makes them better because they're going to have opportunities to get rest and their legs are going to be fresh, especially down the stretch when you've got, Clemson in October, right? You've got, USC last game of the season. You want to be fresh, right? So I think that'll be a very, very good thing for Notre Dame.
I wanted to pull up this question from John Leahy, who said, how do Collie and Maris compare as players in a rotation? John, I was actually about to say, before you even put this in the chat, I wouldn't even be opposed to Collie and Maris playing together at times, right? Because I think that the differences between the two are Maris is a little bit longer. I think he's a little smoother, but I think Collie is a more explosive player, like point A to point B. The kid can move, and he's a little physically more well put together. He's a little denser, right? So I think that Collie can do a little more downhill than a Maris Loifal. Maris Loifal is like almost a pure run and chase Will type, right? Like that's where he's playing in pursuit. Collie, on the other hand, is a little more downhill, a little more physically imposing. So I wouldn't even be surprised if long-term Collie ends up being a Mike. Like I really would not be surprised about that. But as far as where the rotation goes, again, I think navigating space as in pass coverage, I think is going to be more of Maris thing, but I think Collie is a downhill stopper with the explosiveness he has. I think that those are kind of how they mix and match their skill sets.
Like I think that Prince could be a Mike. There's no question about it. I think Junior is a different Mike, right? They will play Mike differently, but they both could be really effective at middle linebacker. They would just play it differently. And that's the best way to put it right now without actually like throwing on film and showing people kind of the differences. And maybe we'll do that as the season wears on. But I feel like they could both be very effective at that spot, but in a different way. I think Prince is more your new school Mike, and I think Junior's your old school Mike is a good way to put it. So, okay, prediction time, apparently, thanks to Archer452. What are your predictions for the season in these three scenarios? Best case, worst case, and most likely.
Can I pull a Brian and say, I don't know yet? I need to evaluate a little more. No, I'm just kidding, Brian, if you're listening. I would say this best case, I think is you're 11-1, 12-0, and you're a potential playoff team. Like, I think that's the best case. I think that I'm going to go to the more likely case. The more likely case, I think, is that you 10-2 to 11-1, right? Like if you're able to split against Clemson, Ohio State, I think would be huge. But I think the most likely is that you're 10-2 or 11-1. And the worst case is that this just isn't the team that we're expecting, and they go like 8-4, right? And that's kind of, I don't think it ever goes under 8-4 because I just have confidence in what the staff can do and what the talent that they have coming back. So I'd say 8-4 worst case, realistic 10-2 or 11-1. Best case, you're 12-0 and you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, you were way more detailed than where I'm going to be. I put best case is 12-0, worst case is 9-3. I really do feel like that's worst case. If they're worse than that, then maybe I need to be looking for a different job, because I really feel like that's worst case. And then I think most likely is like 11-1. I think that's a most likely scenario. I think they split their 2 really tough games, and they're 11-1, and they're going to be in the conversation for some good postseason time. So I guess we'll see. And that's my June 14th outlook, right? I mean, that could change tomorrow depending on some stuff that we learn and how things go. So, all right, let's get this last one here. Ryan, from Jason Saxton. Which 3 players scheduling commitments between July 1st and 4th? Or I'm sorry, with 3 players scheduling commitments between July 1st and 4th. What is your confidence level that we get all 3?
Yeah, so I mean, that's Rico Flores out of California, Folsom High School. It's Micah Bell out of the state of Texas, cornerback, and Christian Gray out of St. Louis. I'll go most confident to least confident here. I would say most confident about Christian Gray right now. I think they're in a great spot there. I would say that Notre Dame is the clear leader going into that one. Micah Bell would be number 2 for me, because I really think that they have a chance to close on Micah Bell here. I think they have a visit coming up with him here to campus, and he loves Notre Dame, and he's about to be on campus. So I think that is going to even improve further. So I'd say that they're in a very good spot with Micah Bell. Rico's the interesting one for me. I think they're in a good spot with Rico. I may even call them the leader leaving the weekend and going into that commitment. The hang up that I have is that he still has the Ohio State visit. Yeah. And we've talked about this a little bit. Yeah. I think depending on how Ohio State's receiver board has kind of filled out, I think that you're either going to make a push or they're not going to take a commitment from him potentially, right? Like, I think that's one of the two there. If they push for him, I think that there is a chance that Rico may strongly consider Ohio State. But if the situation stays the same and Ohio State has a chance to get guys like Brandon Innes and a couple of the other guys, Noah Rogers, and I know they're still in on Carnell Tate. I don't see them trending well with Carnell Tate, though. If their receiver board is looking pretty firm, then I think that Rico ends up at Notre Dame. But I still want to see that one. So I'll say they're in a great position with Christian Gray. They're in a really good position with Micah Bell entering the visit, and I think they're in a good position with Rico Flores, and he could very well end up with Notre Dame. My slight hang up is how that Ohio State visit goes.
All right. Always good stuff from Ryan Roberts, our recruiting director at Irish Breakdown. And that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you, everyone, for logging in and listening to us talk about the Notre Dame defense and where they're ranked by position group. Make sure you make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell. There will be another show tonight, as there will always be a second show in the evening here moving forward. And that is the IB Nation Sports Talk Show with Sean Stiers. It is tonight at 6 o'clock. We got some good stuff on tap for you, so make sure that you check that out at 6 o'clock. And then also, hey, you can always watch it again on YouTube. You can always, download the podcast. That's always good. And make sure, this is what I love about Mace. He always hooks us up here at the end. Join the message board, hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell, share this podcast, and leave a 5-star review. Visit the IB store for some sweet merch. And as always, go Irish. I can't finish it any better than that. We will see you later tonight on the Irish Breakdown podcast.